Welcome back. This week we are going to cover how to sew a 1/4 inch seam and how to sew our strip sets together and cut our blocks for our Simply Rails quilt project that we've been working on for the last few weeks. If you're just turning in today, make sure you watch the first 3 videos in the series. The first one on tools, the second one on how to pick fabrics for the project, and the last one is on how to cut your fabric for the project. Today I'm going to talk about how to do a perfect 1/4 inch seam, which is the most important part about quilting. The more accurate you are about your 1/4 inch seam and with your cutting and pressing, the better your quilts will turn out. The quilting tools that I use to assure that I have a 1/4 inch seam that each time I sew are 3. I have 3 tools, and I'm going to go over them first. Then I'm going to go over to the machine and show you how to set up these tools on your machine, and then finally we will get into the sewing. So the first tool that all your machines should come with, and if not, I would definitely invest in, and they're not that expensive, you need a 1/4 inch foot. 1/4 inch foot means that the edge of the foot is a 1/4 inch away from the sewing needle. That means if your fabric goes to the edge of your foot but not past your foot, you will have a 1/4 inch seam. This is a 1/4 inch foot, just a traditional 1/4 inch foot, nothing fancy about it. Standard, you'll probably get one of these in your machine. Again, if not, they're not that much to buy them on the as an individual foot, so make sure you get one. But then this was the foot I started to learn how to quilt on, and then about 10 years ago, someone came up with the idea of adding a flange on the side of the foot. This foot has a metal bar on the side, and it helps because your fabric will hit the bar before it'll go past the edge of your fabric. It is on the outside edge of your foot, so you don't want it to be under this piece. You want it to go up to this piece. You'll see here, if I can get it up to the camera here, the flange kind of sticks out a little below the foot. So you want your fabric to hit the edge of that, but not go sticking out the other side. And when we get to the machine, it'll be easier to see that. So you can choose which preference you like. A lot of people who learned on the foot without the flange do not like the flange. I tend to really like the flange, so you can choose, but just know there are 2 types of 1/4 inch feet. The next thing I put on my machine is a Clearly Perfect Angles piece of plastic, and I am going to go through how to put this on your machine, so no worries, we're going to go over the machine, you'll see that. But what this does is it gives you your center line, which is the line between the gray and the green. It gives you a 1/4 inch line on the right and a 1/4 inch line on the left. It also gives you these 45-degree lines that work great if you're going to do flying geese and square and square and triangles, which we're not covering in these videos, but I do have a lot of other tutorials that I do cover that, so you can see that. But this is, and I will also link below our perfect 1/4 inch seam video that we did, which gives you, it's pretty much what we're covering here, but there may be some extra tidbits if you choose to watch that. So I'm going to show you how to put this on, and then finally we put on a Q-Tools sewing edge. This is there are 5 purple bumpers in here. We're only going to use 1. And I put it on my Clearly Perfect Angle, so that the fabric, just like the flange on here, flange is way up here, the bumper's back here, you can align your fabric way earlier than before it hits the needle, which is going to make you a much more accurate sewer. I use these 3 tools on all of my machines. I leave them on my machines. If they come off my machine, I can't sew until I put them back on my machine. I'm very dependent on these tools, but I have also sewn thousands of quilts. I can sew faster, I can sew better, and I can sew more accurately with the tools. So we're going to cover those over at the machine. And then the last thing that I'm going to show you over here is our strip sets. We cut these strip sets in the last video, and these are going to be sewn together to make these 3 strips will be sewn together to make 1 strip set. And you can see in my quilt I used the suns, the red dots, and the flowers. Suns, red dots, flowers. So that is the order for those. And we need to sew 3 sets of these. So I'm going to sew the blue to the red and the flowers to the red, and I will show you how to do a whole strip set next, and then I will sew the other 2, and then the other strip set that we have to sew is for this block, the diamonds, the green dots, the purple dot diamonds. So it's red diamonds, green dots, purple diamonds. So let's go over to the sewing machine. I'm going to show you how to sew these, and then I'm going to come back over here in between and show you how to press them, because pressing is as important as cutting and sewing. So let's get started with the sewing part. So I have my little featherweight here set up with my travel table, acrylic table. This product comes with excellent directions. It tells you all the different ways to use their product. It tells you how to set it up on your machine. I'm going to show you how I set up on my machine. It's a little bit different than how they do it, but it works for me. And then you need to customize it for your machine. So in this case, I'm using a featherweight and it's in an acrylic table, and I don't want to tape this tool to my machine because I don't want to ruin all of my beautiful paint job on the machine. So I have actually moved where the tool tells you to cut out. I've moved it down here, so I will actually be able to tape it to the acrylic table. Let's get started. So the first thing you need is you need to take it out of the package. You will need paper scissors and you will need some packing tape. It is a cling tool. It could just cling to my table and I could peel it off when I want to go home and then put it back down. But I find using some packing tape and securing it to the table once I get it exactly where I want it and just leaving it on my table is much more efficient, and it doesn't shift while I'm sewing. So let me show you how to put the clearly perfect angle on your machine. I am doing mine for a featherweight, so I've actually want to be able to put this on here and tape the two ends to each side of the acrylic table. So if I do it where they say to cut it, I would tape on my paint, and I don't want to do that. That being said, the same technique works whether you're going to do it for featherweight or for your machine. You just have to decide how do you want to put this on your machine and customize it to the size of your machine. Some people are going to cut a lot off the bottom because it'll hang off. Some will cut it off the top. That's one of the reasons I really like this tool, is that you can adjust it to what you need it to be. So the first step is you put it on under your machine, and you put the needle down where they tell you to put it down if you're going to leave it where they want it. In my case, I'm going way down here. And then once you have your needle down, I use my 1/4" foot to make sure I have it in the right spot. Take it out. And at this point, you will take your 1/4" foot off your machine. And it'll just get in the way otherwise. And you would unthread it, and you could take your needle out, whatever you need to get to this area. So the next step is we need to cut away this area so that feed dogs will show. And we want to cut this back part away so that it doesn't, like if you just cut this rectangle out, your pieces are going to get caught there. So we're going to cut it away. I like to cut it away while it's still on the cardboard and not cut off. I believe the directions say to take it off and use a seam ripper. I'm just going to do it this way because I think it's a little easier to cut it. I cut past where my needle point is. And repeat the other side. And now what I'm going to do is, this is just garbage, I'm going to audition it on my machine to make sure that my feed dogs are not going to be hitting it. And in this case, because I am going to, there's the needle hole on my throat plate. So that's where it would sit, and the feed dogs would be another 3/8 of an inch past it. So I'm going to go ahead and cut away that. Get rid of that. Try it again. And I need to cut just a hair more away. You can see where this is really, it's a custom fit to your machine. You can't mess it up without really cutting it apart. Don't want to make that a challenge for anybody. All right, so now you can see all of my feed dogs are open. There's nothing back here for my fabric to get caught in, so we're ready to position and tape this guy down. So the first thing I'll do now is take off the cardboard backing. And that just peels right off, like that. And now you can see it's a cling, so it can position it and it'll cling to my sewing cabinet, which is really, or sewing table, which is really quite nice because it'll hold itself in place while I position it. Now, you're going to say, how do I make sure I have a 1/4 inch seam allowance marked on here? Because this piece here is going to be my 1/4 inch seam allowance. And the other thing you may be seeing is because this is a featherweight, it's harder to see all my lines. So you can do two things here. You can go ahead and leave it that way. Or you could just, for the featherweight, because it's a black machine, you could just leave it on the cardboard. It doesn't hurt it. Either way, it doesn't hurt. So in this case, I think I might just leave it on the cardboard for now, just to see how that looks, so we can see what we're doing. So there it is. Get rid of my thread out of the way. So you can do two different things at this point to mark your 1/4 inch. You can take a regular ruler and you crank down the needle until it hits a 1/4 inch point on the ruler. And then you take the tool and you align this line, this green line, the edge of it right with the ruler. And if it's on the edge of the ruler, the 1/4 inch line in the ruler should be right on the printed line on the tool. So that is one way to gauge where it needs to go on your machine. The other way is sometimes you'll see these gadgets that have a hole in it that you can stick your needle in, and then the rest of it is a 1/4 inch guide. I got this as a goodie at a trade show I was at. And there it is. I have my needle in there. This isn't going to slide. I can align the edge of the ruler with the edge of the angler. And you want to make sure that it's all the way, that it's the whole line down at even. Now, if you were doing this on a white sewing machine and you didn't have the white paper, you could actually see through the angler to see another vertical line on your machine that you could use to make sure that everything is lining up vertically. In this case, I know I've done this enough times. I know that's pretty good. The other thing is there is a line on the angler right here that is a dotted line that's a 1/4 inch down from where your needle should go. In this case, again, I've shifted mine down, so I actually drew a line a 1/4 inch down from where my needle goes. And you want to line that horizontally. And you can use that mark when you're doing bindings or mitered corners, or if you're doing diamonds where you have to stop a 1/4 inch from the edge. That's another guide for you. That is explained in the directions wherever I put those. So once I know I have this where I want it, I have this on the 1/4 inch line, the horizontal. I have this lined up the way I want it. I'm going to leave it on the paper. Then I use packing tape. It's clear, it sticks well, it doesn't come undone very easily. And when I do get it off, I can use an alcohol swab just to clean up the sticky residue. It's a nice adhesive. I've been using that to put these on my machines for 20 years. Again, make sure nothing shifted while you did it. And always make sure your acrylic table is in all the way. If you're doing it on an acrylic table, and if you're in a cabinet, make sure everything is square on the cabinet. I'm just gonna get my threads out of the way here. I didn't unthread this because I want to show you some sewing after I get it lined up. But you would probably want to take your threads out. And you can see, I want to make sure that's lined up. And that is. And then we just tape this at the top. Okay. Now it's not going anywhere. Over there on my cabinet, you'll see I have it taped on both sides as well. In this case, I'm not going to do that because, again, I don't want to get any on the tape on the paint on my pretty machine. So then I pull this out, and that is on there. Excuse me. So the next thing I put on my machine are these sewing edges from Q Tools. It is a purple bumper, that I have misplaced. There we go. You get 5 in the pack. They last a long, long time. I'm going to show you another way to make them last even longer. It is a very, very thin bumper. But what happens when I put this on here is my fabric has something to bump up against, and it's less likely to go astray, and my 1/4 inch seams are so much more accurate. If you've taken any of my classes, you'll know I have extras of these in my bag. I usually will put one on your machine if you need it. And then I'm going to go ahead and peel this off. And this one, the purple ones are adhesive. There's orange ones that are cling. I like the adhesive one. I'm going to go ahead and put this gauge back in because I want to make sure that this isn't going to slide anywhere and that it's right where I need it to be. And I'm using the edge of the ruler as my guide. There we go. So now that is on there. And we are ready to go. I just need to put, nope, I noticed I'm a little crooked on the end. All right, I'm gonna put my 1/4 inch foot back on the machine. So now when I go to sew, I have 1, 2, 3 gauges to make sure my 1/4 inch seam is accurate. All right, so now we're over here at the machine. You just saw how I put on the Clearly Perfect angle and the Q-Tools sewing edge, and we've already covered the 1/4 inch foot. So now we're ready to sew our strip sets. And how we're going to do that is we're going to sew one side to the center. I remember I said about salvage, you don't want salvage in your quilt. At this point, we're going to be trimming these into blocks. So you want to go ahead and just leave your salvage. And you're going to line salvage edge, the edges here at the top, and you want, the most important thing is to align these side edges. You want the top and bottom to be aligned. You don't want one sticking out over the other. I tend to put my finger in between and hold it like this, and then as I'm sewing, I kind of can move them into place. So first thing is, you don't want to start on the very end of your fabric. That is a pain in the butt. It gets caught down in your machine and it just is very frustrating. So in this case, we have all salvage. I can just go past it and start I'm starting almost 1/4 inch inside the edge. Put my foot down, make sure the fabric is butt up against my flange, and I'm making sure that the fabric is aligned top and bottom so they're even, and I'm now aligning them with the edge. That means that when I go to sew this, before it even gets to the needle, way back here, I know it is aligned and accurate. That is why I love these tools. So when you get started, depending on your machine, some people will need to put like a starter cloth so the threads don't kind of knot up behind. I tend to just sort of hold them. I'm kind of lazy. So I just hold them when I start so they don't get pulled back in. Got my first couple stitches in. Now you don't need to lock stitch these because we're going to cut these apart. And when I'm piecing, I don't tend to lock stitch. I only do it when I'm doing like top stitching and stuff. So you don't need to go backwards. You don't need to put a knot. You can just keep going straight. So again, all lined up. Go slow when you first start. And this is how I can correct this. So say that was like that way back here. I can see it's off. I can lift it and move it over. That's why I hold them like this. Okay? And this is just for sewing strips. So we're going to sew this whole thing, and I'm going to speed this up so that I can show you how to do the next step. Okay, and as you come up to the end, you just sew right off of the strips. And then you can just break it out. So there's the first strip sewn to my center strip. And I always get rid of these threads. It's always, if you're just a neat sewer and get rid of them, they're less likely to be in your way. Now I'm going to hop over to the pressing board and show you how I press this. Because it is easier, there's no reason you couldn't sew all 3 strips together and press them at once, but it is easier, especially when you're first starting, to sew one set, press it, sew the next one on, and press it. It's just less that you have to it's less unwieldy, it's less you have to fight with. So let's hop on over there. I'm going to press this and then I'll come back and sew the other strip on. All right, so we're back over here. We're going to press this. The rule of thumb in quilting is usually to press to your darker fabric, which in this case I would say the red is darker than the blue, but in all honesty, if you were to press it the other way, it really wouldn't matter. The reason they say that is so that when you press it, if you press it to the lighter side, you're more likely to see the seam through the fabric. Doesn't really bother me, so I tend to press fabrics the way it wants to go. And in this case, the red fabric in my quilt is a little bit heavier than the blue, and it wants to go that way. So we're going to press towards the red. And how you press, and every quilter you meet will show you a different way to press. Just fair warning. We all have our own quirks about pressing. This is how I press everything. And you are welcome to use my way of doing it, or you may meet somebody and find a different way that you enjoy. I want to make sure, first, I always press from the front whenever possible. In more complicated quilts later on, there'll be times you will press from the back, but right now, press from the front is the best advice I can give you. The reason you don't want to press it from the back is if I were to press this from the back, I will show you, just do this end. Say I press that like that, it looks nice and flat. When you bring it over to the front, you can see I've rolled fabric into the seam. See? That little bit of fabric is enough to throw your quilt off if you consistently do it throughout the quilt. So you press from the front. I use the side upper portion of my iron and I push it into the seam. See how I'm pushing that into the seam? I'm not being rough, I'm being very gentle, but that means that fabric is not rolled in my seam. It is laying flat, okay? And that is how I press. Now, some people would say pressing is this. Lift up, move, press. Lift up, move, press. It's a lot of lifting up. So over the years, I've kind of learned to just slide it down, but use the edge of my iron, and you can see how nice and flat that's laying. Make sure your iron is hot. I'm using a little travel Rowenta iron here. This thing gets super hot. Over at my ironing board, I use a T-fall iron, and I love it. It gets hot. It has a ceramic plate. I got it on Amazon. It wasn't expensive. But you'll notice I'm not using any spray. I'm not using any starch. I tend to only use those when I absolutely have to, because I just don't like having to put some chemicals on my fabric. That being said, if you end up being a starcher, I won't judge you, I promise. So we have that first side on. Now we're going to go back over to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew the flower strip on. Then we're going to come back and we're going to press it again. This time I'm going to press it towards the red again. And then I'm going to sew another one of these sets together and I'll show you how we press those. So we have this all pressed. Here's the flowers. We're going to go ahead and sew it on. I'm just going to speed through this. It's the same scenario as last time. Just make sure you're sewing this strip to the right side and not over here, because then we have to do ripping. We don't want to have to do a class on ripping. Okay, so we've got our last strip sewn onto this strip set, and I am actually going to press it up. So all the seams will go the same way. So we're going to go ahead and line this up. Again, use the edge of your iron and press into the seam, and you see as you do this more and more, it's more comfortable. You can do it rather quickly. The other thing is to have a good pressing mat. I'm pressing on an Omni Grid travel mat over here. Over at my cutting table, which I will show you in another video, is I have a wool mat on it. I love pressing on the wool mats because the heat radiates up and it helps set the seams better. This has a foily finish on it, does the same thing, but this little travel thing from Omni Grid has a cutting mat on the other side. It's perfect for travel, but it's also perfect for demos here in the studio on video. So once we have our strip sets sewn, here's the first strip set. I went ahead and did the second strip set, so we have one of each. Now it's time to cut our blocks. So I'm going to show you how to cut our blocks, and then next week I'll show you how to sew them all together. So to cut our blocks, you take one strip set. Our blocks are going to finish at 6.5 inch square. How I know that is if you take a ruler and you measure the 3 strips you've sewn, they should measure 6.5 inches from top to bottom. This is a 6.5 inch square ruler. You do not need a 6.5 inch square ruler. You certainly can cut them. You certainly can cut them with this bigger ruler. If you're going to really get into quilting though, a 6.5 inch square ruler is a really handy backup ruler for cutting smaller things, so you're not fighting with this big, huge acrylic ruler. It's not arduous, but I do find it easier to cut with a smaller ruler because it's less that I have to kind of control. So if you are in the market for a second ruler, 6.5 inch square rulers are the best. And we do have those on our website, and I will put the link below for them. So first, just like how we cut fabric, we are going to get rid of our salvage. We do not want our salvage. You need to get 13 blocks from this the 3 strip sets. You will get 6 blocks per set, so that means you have enough fabric to cut 18 of these blocks. So cut this set first. It has the most slush. That way if you're still trying to figure out how to cut these and you make a mistake, you have excess. The second strip set, we need 12 blocks, and we only made 2 strip sets. So you will use all of the second strip sets for your blocks. So cut them second, because you will be warmed up and practiced and a pro by the time you get there. So here's the first one. I'm aligning a horizontal line with the sewn seam. I am not using the edges out here because especially when you're first starting, they can get kind of wavy on you. Always use, and even, you know, honestly, right now I still always use a seam to align with. And I first get rid of all of my junk, my salvage stuff, this stuff. And just like cutting fabric, flip it over. Don't burn it with your iron. Now my ruler will work. This happens to be a 6.5 inch ruler, so I just have to match the edge of the ruler with the fabric. If I'm using this bigger guy, do not have anything out here under it. Make sure it's laying flat on your table. Align again, a horizontal line with a line on the ruler, and the 6.5 inch line with the edge there. Hand just like before. So it's not any different than cutting your strips, except now you've sewn some fabric together. And that is our first block. So we're going to go ahead and cut those. I am going to switch over to my cute little ruler, because personally it's just easier for me. And I am a creature of habit. So there's 1, there's 2. Again, same thing. It may start getting skewed on you as you're cutting. You may have to square this up again. You do have enough to square it up. I mean, don't go crazy, but you'll see in the end here when I'm done cutting how much extra you have to use if you need to square this up. Now, the fabric requirements I gave you, you do have enough to get another strip out of there if you need it, if you make a mistake. It's always good to have backup. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So I will cut the remaining 7 blocks from the other 2 strip sets once I get them sewn, and there we go. There are 6 of block 1. Now I want to show you, as you progress in your cutting and quilting world, you will feel more comfortable cutting more layers. So even sewn strip sets, you can cut 2 layers up. I would do this only if you're comfortable with cutting and you've done it a little bit. You will see here I'm aligning the edges of both the top and bottom. You could always give it another just press and it'll stick together. Flip this over so I can trim off the end. Again, horizontal line with a sewn line on the strip set. Cut that off. Flip this over. And Again, horizontal line, finger on the mat, hold the ruler. Now I can cut them 2 at a time. So that's 2, 4, 6. There we go. So your homework between this video and next is to sew your 3 strip sets for block 1 together and then cut 13 of these blocks, and to sew your 2 strip sets of block 2 together and cut 12 of those. Once you have all your blocks cut, we'll be ready to assemble our quilt top, and we will cover that in our next video. I hope you've enjoyed this series, and if you have any questions, you can always leave comments in the below, or you can email me. And if you've enjoyed, make sure you like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, make sure you like and subscribe below. You can find the Whimsical Workshop on our website, thewhimsicalworkshop.com, and that has all links to all of our other social media platforms. Thanks for joining us.